It's definitely a fundamental approach, that is, looking at companies and their merits. It's a bottoms-up approach in that while you're interested in what's happening in economies in broader senses, it's the quality of the companies that you buy that's crucial. And every share, as I say in the book from a famous funds manager, you can think of it as a lottery ticket, but it's not. It's a share in a business, and you need to understand the business. So the first thing is we invest in businesses. The second thing is a business's real value long term is based entirely on its capacity to generate free cash flow in the future to return to its shareholders. So I guess I'm what you'd call a GARP, growth at a reasonable price investor, but I'm also a value investor in the sense that I want to buy either hard assets that have got a generating capacity or a future stream of income that's got strong growth in it. I've done it for two reasons, and the first is perhaps less obvious when you read the book, and it's to make people who may feel that investing at a high level is too complex for them, feel more comfortable with the process. I've met people who were who felt that they needed to talk down their skills in this area because they had no formal training. But when I actually analysed how they went about looking at things, their fundamental approach was actually good. So most people have done some gardening. Most people understand a little bit about gardens and they take an interest in it. So it was to make a connection at that level to say you shouldn't think of this as a high-level art that you'll always have to go and find someone for. I say in here that you shouldn't discount and also you should recognise when you perhaps would benefit from some help, but don't be too frightened by the process because some people try and make it complex. And if you understand some basic rules, it's not quite that hard. So that's the first one. The second, though, is that, and I say it in the book, is that the sort of approach to things that makes a good gardener is the sort of approach to things that makes a good investor. The concept of having a long view, the concept of having a formal plan of what it is that you want. I use the context of yield and the need for it. And of course, gardens yield things. They yield fruit, they yield whatever. So there are points of connection to say that if you think like a good gardener and you know what you want from what I describe as your financial plot, the parallels to how you think about getting the results are very similar. So it's got a twofold purpose, to make a connection to things that people can understand and also to look at the rules of gardening and why applied to investing they have relevance. Yeah, I did. And I did it in a sort of shamefaced way because I mention him in here and it's always been my habit. I just think it's polite that if you're actually going to mention people in the book that you get in touch and make them aware. It's just a courtesy. So apropos nothing at all, I just shot him a copy saying, I do mention you in here, basically apologies for not letting you know before. I'm sure a lot of people use your name, but here it is. I was absolutely stunned when I got a handwritten note back from him telling me, and I'm very careful how I use this because to me it's a very private thing, and I wrote him a private. But I was stunned to get back a handwritten note, basically saying to me, dear Peter, you've written a very good book. It should be read by all investors. And he went on to say specifically, particularly the advice on page 17. Anybody I've told that is they say, can you rip out page 17 and give it to me? And I say, no, read the whole book. Well, what I'd say is it outlines not all the aspects of, but most of the important aspects that you need to understand, most of the important principles that you need to adopt, in my view. And I put I evidence or I reference to a lot of things that evidence that. So it's not just my view; it's got support for it. But I say that if you understand all the key elements in here and they're put in a logical sequence, then you know a fair bit about investing. it might well be too that you recognise enough about it that you also recognise that perhaps there might be areas where you need some assistance. But it's done with a view to being a DIY book. If you decide you want to do it yourself, there are useful tips. If you decide in reading all of this that maybe it's a little bit more complex than you understand, or that you believe that you can handle, or perhaps even have the time to handle, that you might go to someone else. But in that context, it'll also give you some ground rules for assessing the people who are managing your money.